Hyrule Castle fights in even greater darkness than before. This is Legendary Adventures, a Legend of Zelda playthrough podcast. This week in Four Swords Adventures, we're tackling the 4th level of Hyrulean Adventure, Near the Fields. The first stage of level 4 is simply called the Field. We are dropped into a grassy area south of Hyrule Castle. It is raining. Just north of our starting position, we find a girl with red hair. She stands just west of a hill with 6 cannons lodged into the hillside. Soldiers stand atop this hill, and the cannons spew fireballs at regular intervals. The Green Maiden urges us to speak to this girl, saying that she's liable to be attacked while alone here in the field. The girl is Malon, the farm girl who was first introduced in Ocarina of Time. She notices the Green Maiden in the form of a fairy near Link. She says her father told her that good boys and girls get to meet fairies, so the presence of the maiden makes her trust Link. Malon explains that she is trapped in this spot by the rain and the soldiers, who will not stop firing their cannons on the hillside. She says the cannons are old and they're not meant to be used. The entire situation is just strange. We agree to take Malon home to Lon Lon Ranch, which she explains is right up the road. What follows is an escort mission. Malon follows behind the Lynx. She has her own health meter, a single heart. Thankfully, we can refill that heart if she takes damage, but it can be somewhat fiddly and requires some maneuvering. We dodge the fireballs from the cannons, and then fight our way through soldiers armed with bows who hide in the grass, while pushing generally towards the east. It's not long before we reach the ranch and her father, Talon. Malon explains that the Lynx saved her from the strangely behaving soldiers of Hyrule. As a thank you, Talon allows the Lynx to use his horses on their journey. To the east, we receive a crystal ball with a carrot inside. Tossing the ball summons the horses. The Lynx are suddenly on horseback and moving at great speed. They are invincible while on horseback. Players ride them through the stage, jumping fences and collecting force gems. The horses are only active for a brief time, but players can extend the time that they ride or summon horses again should they disappear by collecting carrots. After navigating down the path with the horses, players reach an open field where the rain stops and the sun comes out. In this sunny area, players encounter Goma enemies. The design of the Gomas resembles the design seen in the original Legend of Zelda. These, however, are different because they wander freely rather than simply moving back and forth. They also do not attack the player with fireballs, but the players cannot damage them, at least not right now, and so we must just avoid them. There are also fallen trees which players can move when in formation. On the western side of the field is a house with a man and his son inside. The son gives us a key to a shed on a screen to the east of the house. There are weapons inside. He asks us to destroy the Gomas with the weapons. However, none of those weapons will damage a Goma. The father tells us there is a weapon which can hurt them, and we'll find it in a cave where his ancestors are buried. But he says the path has crumbled and the cave is currently inaccessible. I went to the shed and chose a pair of Pegasus boots. I then headed north towards the cave that the father mentioned, and eventually ran into a dead end. There are holes in the ground which we cannot get past, just like he warned. At the same time, based on his hint, I figured this was the correct way to go. But after trying various ways to bypass these holes, I decided I wasn't properly equipped and I went back south. I noticed a hole inside a fence and decided to start moving logs around to see what I could find. As I started moving fallen trees around, I found other holes. To the east of these holes, there's a particularly large log, which I discovered could be lifted by the Lynx in wide formation. An enormous force gem is also visible, but out of reach. Tingle attempted to take this gem, but could not lift it. Heading north, there was a large stone with a set of stairs underneath. Down the stairs, there's a great fairy, which upgraded my Pegasus boots to Pegasus Boots Level 2. With the upgraded boots, Link can run on air, crossing over holes and pits. I headed back to the path leading to the cave which the father pointed us to, and using the Pegasus boots I ran over the holes and entered the cave. Once inside, we head left and grab a key. then north through a locked door to get a bow. We then backtrack and take out each Goma by shooting them in the eye. After all the Gomas are destroyed, we return to the home, and the sun gives us a shovel. He says there's a hidden path to Hyrule Castle we can find by digging. He also hints that we should visit the Great Ferry to upgrade the shovel to level 2, so that's what I did. Then, in the area just south of the ferry, there are a number of holes that have already been dug. We dig and find the hidden hole, which leads to a side-scrolling area, and that massive force gem, which is worth 1,000 gems. Following the path away from the gem, we face a combat challenge. There is a house in the center of this arena. I planned to enter that house after I cleared the combat challenge. I first took out a dozen archer soldiers, then 2 ball and chain soldiers appeared, and they smashed the house to pieces. I checked a walkthrough later, and it looks like players can get a bow inside the house if it isn't destroyed. After the ball and chain soldiers fell, a chief soldier appears with around 14 other soldiers. When these soldiers first enter, their armor is yellow and they move in formation. Then their armor turns red and the formation breaks. After the chief soldier falls, we can move north for a second combat challenge. For this challenge, players find an area with a dome in the center. It has a design which resembles Vati's eye. There are 2 Stalfos that we need to defeat. There's also a large shadow carrying a sword which can be seen in the light world. It can attack us with this sword, but we cannot hurt it. Once the 2 Stalfos fall, the eye on the dome turns into a portal, sucking players into the Dark World. The shadow is revealed to be a giant sword-wielding Stalfos. We dodge its swings and land a few hits of our own. After several hits, it falls. Back in the light world, the spirit of a knight with blue hair and blue armor appears. It is a knight of Hyrule, tasked with protecting a blue royal jewel. The knight explains that it fell under the influence of dark powers and was transformed into a monster, while the jewel was turned into a portal to the Dark World. He apologizes for this and says in order to reach the Tower of Winds and the Realm of the Heavens, we must collect the royal jewels. There are 3 other knights who are also cursed and hold these remaining jewels. We receive the blue royal jewel and end the stage. That a second MacGuffin is introduced here is strange to me. We already have a goal of saving the maidens. Now, in a multi-act Zelda title, a new set of MacGuffins are introduced with a second act. So, for an example, in A Link to the Past, the first act sees players chasing after the medallions and Master Sword, while the second act sees Link rescuing the maidens. I wouldn't say that Hyrulean Adventure has more than one act, but it does have multiple sets of MacGuffins. With the introduction of this second set, from here on out players will find a jewel before they rescue the maiden on the 3rd stage. The second stage is the swamp. As the level begins, we're greeted by Kaepora Gaebora, the owl, who explains that the swamp has been poisoned by Vati. We need to avoid the poison water as we make our way through the stage. The poisoned swamp setting recalls Majora's Mask. While I felt pretty positive about level 3 in all 3 Death Mountain stages, and I liked the field, I found myself disliking the swamp. There are some mechanics that I dislike and some issues that I have with it that really crop up here. Now that said, it's not all bad. There are some things that I quite like about the stage, including the music, which is strong. It seems to be an original theme, or at least I didn't place it as a returning theme. It's dark and haunted with horror movie keyboards which create ghostly wails. A second B section introduces horns which have a more hopeful and heroic vibe to them, a lone figure standing against the darkness. Early on in the stage, we're confronted with a segment where Shadow Link throws giant bombs out onto the stage. Players have to duck into Game Boy Advance screens in order to stay safe. I didn't much care for this mechanic when it showed up on the coast, and I didn't much care for this sequence either. We have to use bomb flowers to destroy unmarked sections of the wall to find caves which we can hide inside. The second cave holds a Rock's Feather item in a side-scrolling segment. It was here that the game tried to teach me something, but I missed the clues entirely. To get the item, we need to drop from a ladder into an alcove with the feather. There are 2 cracked blocks on the floor, and no way to get out the way that we came. We're supposed to use the downward thrust on the cracked blocks by jumping and then attacking to break them. This did not connect with me at all, and I restarted the stage. I had it in my head that the only way to destroy these blocks was by blowing them up with a bomb. So when I reached this spot a second time, I separated my links and sent only one down to get the item. I then switched back to one of the links still on the ladder, and used the Y button to recall all the links back together. Still, I felt I was missing something. Zelda titles rarely put you in a position where you can get stuck and you're forced to restart a level. I wasn't sure what I was missing, however. On the next screen, we lift a stone and enter another side-scrolling area which contains more Rock's Feather items to pick up. After platforming around the screen, we lift up a second stone and run into a dead end formed by these cracked blocks in another side-scrolling area. I spent some time retracing my steps to see if I missed a bomb pickup somewhere, but there weren't any. There's also no way to reach this spot without Rock's Feather, and the design of the first side-scrolling area on the screen prevents backtracking, so players are locked into this area until they find the solution to breaking the blocks. I tried picking up a second Rock's Feather just to see if there was something in the hint text that I missed, and it does mention that you can do a downward thrust. That's when it clicked with me. In Zelda 2, there are certain blocks that players are supposed to break with downward thrusts and upward strikes. I realized the game was attempting to get me to use the downward thrust on these blocks, and sure enough, Link can break them. And while I was eventually able to reach the solution, I do feel this highlights an issue that I ran into with the Hyrulean Adventure multiple times. There are some actions and solutions that I don't feel are clearly communicated. We'll see this more later on in the stage and in later stages as well, but let me explain just a little bit about what I mean. Prior to this point in the game, when I ran into cracked blocks, bombs were used to destroy them. Now that's in line with previous Zelda games as well. And while Zelda 2 allowed you to destroy some blocks with the sword, in that game those blocks had a unique appearance, which clearly marked them as being different from other blocks or walls in the game. In the past, games like Link's Awakening also saw obstacles with unique appearances to mark the proper item to use. For instance, in that game, cracked blocks were destroyed with bombs, while objects with a crystalline appearance were destroyed with the Pegasus boots. The visuals, while mysterious at first, eventually come to clearly communicate the action, but I don't feel like that happens here with this game. The hint text does not clearly communicate those actions either. I was eventually able to figure this out, but I did not figure out some of the others. We proceed through the level using Rock's Feather to platform across poisoned water. Some platforms have Zora under them. The Zora will rise up and fling the links high into the air to get some extra distance. I like the scaling effects as the links are tossed upward towards the camera. Along the way, we take out some soldiers in a combat challenge. There are also a few screens with switches spread out across the screen, requiring us to separate our 4 links to reach them all. The path eventually leads us to a graveyard. As with past Zelda titles, the gravestones can be pushed. Some have holes leading to cave areas underneath. I pushed one gravestone right near the graveyard entrance, and there was nothing underneath. A second was placed as though it blocked a path, seeming to signal us to push it, so I did. And I found a cave which contained force gems and a blue bracelet. The bracelets reduced Link's damage by half for the rest of the stage. After exiting this grave, a bat enemy appears which circles around Link and leaves a damaging trail behind it. I found this to be one of the most annoying enemies in the game. Thankfully, it's limited to just this one screen of the stage. I then proceeded north where I found the ghost of a girl who was crying. She says all her friends have left and she is scared. She doesn't seem to realize that she's dead. It's such a sad little detail to include, but it adds to the vibe of the stage in a positive way. Heading south from this girl and then east, I found a great fairy fountain hidden under a gravestone right at the entrance. This fairy heals Link rather than upgrading an item. Other stones rise up from the ground and fling themselves at Link like the flying tiles which are found in some dungeons. Only the center gravestone remains when all of the others have flung themselves at Link. Pushing this one up, I ran into a dead end. A shuttered door with 2 ice switches on either side. I needed a bow, but I hadn't come across one yet. I returned to the first screen of the graveyard and began pushing all of the gravestones. Under the third gravestone from the left on the first row, there is a hole leading to a cave. There are 5 platforms in this cave, with a dark pit between all of them. We fall onto the central platform when we enter the cave. There is a bow on the platform to the left, but it cannot be reached because it's surrounded by blocks. To the south of the bow on this same platform, there are blocks surrounding a pot. There is a slightly darker colored square to the north of the block which sits just north of the pot. This, to me, would seem to indicate that the block can be pushed or pulled, but that's not the case. To the north and east there are ice switches, which are also surrounded by blocks. It's clear that we need to break that pot in order to proceed, it's just a question of how do we do it. I tried jumping directly towards the pot and attacking, but that doesn't work. Link performs a downward thrust straight into the pit. Slashing at the pot from the other side of the block also does not work. Link's sword will not reach it. The blocks do not budge when pushed or pulled. After trying and retrying those actions and again checking other areas of the graveyard, I was getting nowhere. I eventually broke down and checked a walkthrough, and it turns out the solution was to use a downward thrust against the block on top of the pot. This somehow causes it to break. It's the one thing that I didn't think to try, but it also seems to not make any real sense to me. If the sword didn't reach the pot to begin with, why would striking the ground next to a block, which is next to a pot, cause that pot to break? At any rate, that ends up being the solution. Under the pot there is a floor switch, which when pressed causes the blocks around the bow and the ice switches to disappear. This allows us to get the bow, and then to shoot the switches, which create a path to exit the cave. I then returned to that shuttered door and went through it, dodging spike traps in a cave and shooting some ice switches to get a couple of keys to open doors leading to a moon pearl. The moon gate is located on the west side of the graveyard, just south of a house that we cannot reach because of an L-shaped pool of poison water. By crossing into the Dark World, we can exit through a second portal in the house's backyard. The house is owned by Dompe, the gravekeeper who first appeared in Ocarina of Time. Dompe mentions Shadow Link has been stirring up trouble, and tells us about a dark mirror. According to legend, a dark tribe was sealed within this mirror long ago. The mirror was hidden within the Forest of Light, but the forest itself has been transformed into a Forest of Dark since the release of Vati. After getting this information from Dompe, we check a treasure chest inside his home and find a power bracelet. Outside Dompe's home, we can step on 4 switches hidden under bushes to light 4 torches. This destroys the ghosts which surround his home, and the pool of water which is outside his home. It makes it easier to navigate the area, but no new pathway is really opened. It's here again that I found myself stumped, and I feel it's all because the actions that players must take are again not clearly communicated in-game. Now, I'll grant that this could just be because of my own assumptions from previous games, but I still did not know what to do next. Dompe's dialogue does not change, nor does the dialogue of the ghost girl. There aren't any large stones to try to lift and move like we would have done in previous Zelda titles. It seemed as though I was at a dead end. So I again checked a walkthrough, and it was there that I learned that Link can now lift and throw trees with the power bracelet. This really only applies to some trees, though. They can't be part of a group of trees, and they need to be of the most common tree designs seen around the world. This is also, to my memory, the only game in the entire series where Link can uproot and lift trees with the power bracelet. The item text is no real help in determining this strategy. It says only, "You feel like you could lift anything." I later tracked down a copy of the manual, and sure enough it does state clearly that you can lift trees. While the manual was essential for the first 2 games, I really feel that starting with A Link to the Past, it's not been essential for any other game in the series, although Four Swords Adventures, it turns out, is the one exception here. Beyond the tree which we uproot, we come to a dark area with searchlights moving across the field. It's a reference to the Wind Waker. Producer Eiji Aonuma points to an example of how Four Swords bridge together multiple eras of the Zelda series. In an interview with Nintendo World Report, Aonuma said, Four Swords being a game that is going to be something that will feel familiar and be appealing to people of both time periods, both the old school fans and the new school fans. One example of that is an element where he, that being the director, took a spotlight from the Wind Waker. If you played through Four Swords, you'll find an area where he's done some kind of interesting things with the spotlight and applied it to 2D. If you are caught by a searchlight, ghosts swarm around the links. So we avoid the lights and move southwest to find lanterns. To the northeast, there's another tree to toss in order to advance north. Using the lantern light, we locate star switches, which light torches and destroy large ghosts. Once all the ghosts are destroyed, the boss is revealed. It's Jalhalla, the ghost boss from the Earth Temple of the Wind Waker. We only see the head, or mask rather, of the boss in this fight. We need to step on the star switches to light torches. Once it flies into the light, Jalhalla becomes tangible and we can hit the boss. It also suddenly flies towards the screen and spawns in a number of ghosts, and on subsequent hits, anti-fairies. It also has a flamethrower attack. After 4 hits or so, Jalhalla falls, allowing us to reach a barrier and exit the stage. Let's check in with Tingle again. Of course, as mentioned in the previous episodes this season, the Tingle Tower will appear after every second stage. On level 4, we unlock the eastern portal on the first row, which leads to a game known as monster hunting.
Oh goodness. We have to go find monsters or we're hunting each other?
Here's a sign.
Probably this way.
Tingle times. Tingle's a tad upset about all the monsters appearing hereabouts. If you're going to kick the beasts around a bit, you best have force fairies. And no whining. Tingle.
So we're just killing a bunch of monsters, in other words.
A bunch of monsters.
It's a series of combat challenges. We have to clear 3 screens of dozens of enemies. We first wipe out the green enemies with yellow tentacles on the top, known as Ropa. That's followed by a screen packed with crabs, vultures, and buzzblobs.
How am I supposed to kill these things? Because I'm doing it wrong.
You need like a bow or a boomerang or something so you can whack them without getting shocked. I don't know how we're supposed to beat those guys
without something. Is there something down here? The birds. Okay.
Yeah, I got gems out of a chest. Oh, there's bows here at the bottom. Jeez.
Oh, I see them.
I did not notice that at all.
Finally, we wipe out a screen of Octoroks. The third screen has a roughly cross-shaped formation of rocks at the center, and squares of rock around crystal switches in each of the 4 corners. Once the Octoroks are gone, the rocks disappear, and we hit the crystal switches. Each switch reveals more enemies. There are 2 switches on the east, and the lower switch on the west will trigger a shower of force gems, with a force-like inside. The upper switch on the west reveals 2 Hynoks.
Oh. Ah! Run away, run away! Okay. Ah! Did I die? No.
No, they'll grab you and they'll shake the gems out of you, though.
This guy's coming at me! No, go away. No. How do you kill them, then?
They just take lots of hits. They're just really strong.
Mandy had more force gems as we headed in to meet Tingle.
Hey, notice my score right now? Whoop, whoop!
What?
Whoop, whoop! I mean, I'm definitely not winning overall, but hey! I got some points on the board this time.
Tingle hands out bonus gems based on the number of monsters you killed, so ultimately I won, but it was close.
Okay, fine. But I was winning.
Yeah.
And y'all saw that.
We had a fun time with the Monster Hunt. There is another Monster Hunt game on a later level, so you'll hear more of Mandy's opinion on the Monster Hunt games in that later episode. The third and final stage of level 4 is the infiltration of Hyrule Castle. Much like how A Link to the Past's first act ended with a revisit to Hyrule Castle, Four Swords Adventures places a revisit to Hyrule Castle at its midpoint. The stage expands upon the searchlight mechanics introduced with the swamp. The lights are attracted to sounds like breaking pots. I attempted to use this to my advantage by creating sound to distract the lights at first, only to get caught immediately because I broke a pot. Yikes. In this stage, getting caught lands Link in a jail cell. Luckily, a pot hides a hole in the floor of the cell, and using this hole we can traverse a side-scrolling area and move into an adjacent cell. It holds boomerangs. We can then backtrack to the first cell and throw the boomerang through the bars to find a key hidden in another pot. Once back outside, we dodge the searchlights, at one point diving into the moat around the castle in order to advance while dodging the lights all the while. After dodging the lights across 4 screens, we venture inside the castle. This time the castle is dimly lit, and it's filled with ghost and anti-fairy enemies. The castle is laid out in such a way that it involves players taking 1 step forward and then 1 step back before taking 2 steps forward. Here's what I mean. In the second room of the castle, we find a room within a room. There's a rectangular area filled with anti-fairy enemies, closed off by blocks. There's a treasure chest inside this rectangular area, and a locked door to the east. We push the blocks to access the inner area, grab a key from a chest, and notice there's a moon gate within this inner area as well. Through the locked door, we find a dark room with eye switches. There's a path that cannot be seen. In order to reveal the path so we can advance across the room, we need to first head north. We pull a switch and open a door on the west side of the room. We then pull a second switch to get a moon pearl and then backtrack to the previous room to enter the moon gate. Inside the dark world, we find a bow. Then it's back to the room to the east. We use the bow to hit eye switches which briefly light the area, showing the path across the room. Now that we can see the paths, we advance through the dungeon. There is a key in a chest on the north side of the room and a locked door on the southeast. Through this locked door, we find a room with a shuttered door and 4 unlit torches on the north central part of the room. A locked door is on the screen to the northeast. An open door to the south. We head south and exit the castle again. We dodge searchlights and get a key from a chest, then backtrack to that locked door, which reveals a stash of lanterns. Using the lantern in a cross formation, we light 4 torches at once to open the path forward. And from there, it's just a straight shot to the boss door. The boss is a giant Poe who seems to be a callback to Jalhalla, though unlike the previous boss, it doesn't look exactly like that boss from the Wind Waker. We reveal the boss by lighting 4 torches in the room. Like Jalhalla in the Wind Waker, this boss is a ghost which wears a mask and carries a lantern. It also has sort of a blue-gray coloration to its body. The boss sucks in a big gulp of air and exhales to extinguish all the torches. It then flies around the room using its lantern as a searchlight. If Link gets caught in the lantern light, the ghost will again blow out torches. When all 4 torches are relit, the ghost becomes tangible. It will inhale again and suck Link into its mouth. We'll move to a Game Boy Advance area. In this area, there's a small green ghost which we can attack with the sword. After 3 rounds of lighting the torches and then getting sucked into the large ghost and landing hits on the small ghost, the boss falls. We then free the White Maiden. She notices the blue jewel the Lynx acquired from the Knight of Hyrule, and then urges the Lynx on to her forest home to get the Dark Mirror. The MacGuffins are really piling up pretty quickly here. She tells us that a dark tribe invaded Hyrule long ago. They were defeated and then hidden in the mirror. The mirror was then hidden in the forest temple. She says the mirror is dangerous if it falls in the wrong hands. We're told once again that the forest has become twisted by darkness. Next week we will brave the Dark World in order to seek out the Dark Mirror and the next Royal Jewel, along with the Red Maiden. If you would like to follow along, please subscribe. And a big thank you to anyone who has subscribed already. You are incredible. I am Paul Riley, and I will see you next week.